In this video, I want to share some of the top mistakes that I see homeowners make when they're selecting plants for their landscape. So I'm going to go over lots of different mistakes and sort of tips and tricks along the way to make sure that you're picking the right plant for the right place. My name is Amy, and over at Pretty Purple Door, I help home gardeners design landscapes that are uniquely you. So let's get into these plant selection mistakes and how to fix them. So we're going to get the big one out of the way, and this is choosing the wrong plant for your location. So there's a lot of different considerations that you need to make when you're choosing plants for your landscape. Everything from your local climate, like will the plant survive how hot and how cold it gets where you live, to the sunlight exposure. Over 6 hours is considered full sun. From 3 to 6 hours is a partial sun situation. And then from 3 hours or less, it's typically considered a shady area. Soil conditions are another thing. Is it sandy? Is it clay? Does it drain well? Etc. Water needs. Plants need different levels of water. Some are very drought tolerant. Some need a lot of water to survive. And then there's obviously wildlife and pests, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. This is like deer or squirrels or armadillos or different pests that you may have on your property that you have to plan ahead for when you're choosing your plants. And the thing that really got me when I was a new gardener was I wasn't considering this as separate areas. So I was thinking about, okay, my landscape is full sun, but it's really not full sun everywhere on my property. So you have to think about the particular location where you're putting the plant and what the conditions are in that specific location. So I have areas that are really shady and dry. I have other areas that are shady but very wet. I have some areas that are full sun, some that are part. So everybody's landscape is going to have different areas. So you have to make sure that you know the conditions in that specific area before you're choosing those plants. And if you're struggling with this, you're totally not alone. It's actually one of the most common mistakes that I see home gardeners make, and it's covered in full in my 3 Garden Design Secrets training. It's a full 1 hour long free training that you can take. I'll leave a link to that in the description below. It's not that you'll never be able to find a plant that will work for you. There are plants for all different conditions, and check out that training if you want to learn more about that. Mistake number 4 is accidentally buying invasive or aggressive plants for your landscape. And this is something that I fell into the trap of when I was a new gardener because I wasn't doing the research that you need to do before you buy those plants. So aggressive and invasive are typically used interchangeably in the gardening world, and that's really just not the case. Invasive plants actually disrupt the local ecosystem, and they're really, really bad. So you never, ever, ever want to plant an invasive plant. It's really going to do damage beyond the scope of just your yard or your property. And a lot of people just think that invasives are plants that spread, and they spread a lot, but that's not always the case either. So before you buy a plant, I always suggest Googling that plant and just type in, is salvia invasive in whatever your state is? And usually you'll be able to tell pretty quickly if the plant is on the invasive species list or not. The other trap that you can fall into is aggressive plants, and it's not as simple with an aggressive plant. There are situations where you may want to plant something aggressive, like on a steep hill that you want to cover with a ground cover and you don't want to have to mow there. You want something that's going to grow quickly and going to take over that area. So planting a plant that's aggressive isn't necessarily bad. A lot of native plants are actually quite aggressive in their growing habits. So you just want to make sure that you're aware of the growth habit of the plant, how to take care of that plant, and how to get rid of it if you actually need to get rid of it in the future, because a lot of these plants, it's almost impossible to get rid of them. Once they start spreading, they're spreading by like underground rhizomes, and you'll have to dig them out or hire somebody to actually remove those plants for you. So it's really important to know the growing habits of the plants that you're planting and make sure that even if you need an aggressive plant, that it's not invasive. I have another video that covers in detail why plants are considered invasive, and I'm talking specifically in that video about the burning bush. I'll leave a link to it up here or up here somewhere and in the description below, so you can check out that video too. But again, invasive is a no-no, and aggressive is used with caution. Mistake number 3 when it comes to plant selection is not actually using enough of each plant, and this is something I see that's really, really common with DIYers. Landscapes are really large and they're really big. So if you're just choosing one salvia and one iris and one of something else, it's not going to make a big enough impact, especially if you're viewing the landscape from a distance. So I always recommend, instead of planting one of this and one of this and one of this, why not just plant 12 salvia? Like, just plant a large grouping planting of a plant that you love and that you know performs really well in your landscape, you're going to be set up for a lot more success if you do this than if you're just planting one, I call it the onesie twosies, one here and one here and one here. And overall, it may look good to you when you're up close to it, but from a distance, it ends up looking quite messy and just like you didn't have a plan at all. So you can usually tell that something was DIY'd just from this alone, that they don't have enough of each plant. So next time you're at the nursery and you see a plant you really love and that you know grows well in your climate, grab 12 of them instead of just one. Or some people say grab 3, at least grab 3, but I'd say try 12. Why not? If you like the way one of them looks, you're definitely going to like the way that 12 of them looks together. Mistake number 2 when it comes to plant selection is not planning for seasonal interest and choosing plants that bloom throughout the different seasons in your garden. So this is another really common one because a lot of times when people plant perennial plants, which are the ones that come back year after year, they don't typically have a really long season of bloom. You're lucky if you can get 3 or 4 weeks out of a perennial plant and blooming. I have some that are a little bit longer blooming. I have another video I'll put a link to somewhere up here with the longest blooming ones in my own garden, but typically you're going to get 3 or 4 weeks out of it. And then after that, it's going to look pretty boring in your landscape if you don't have something to replace that with as the seasons change. And the real kicker to this is that when you go to the nursery, when you go shopping at the nursery, typically the plants that you'll see out at that time are the ones that are blooming at that time. So they don't really have the space to accommodate having plants for spring, summer, and fall all at one time. So you can remedy this by just going shopping at different times of the year at your nursery. You can also check out that 3 Garden Secrets training. I give a lot more tips for this in that training. And I also have my Design Your 4-Season Garden course, which goes over like my entire process for choosing plants for a landscape, how I would do it for a homeowner if I were working on their property, and how you can do it at home, and lots of charts and other things that go along with that. So again, links in the description for that stuff, but overall just shopping more and shopping more often and not choosing all of your plants just at the first sign of spring is a really great place to start with this so that you have color and interest in all of the different seasons and not just in early spring. And mistake number 1 is not considering the entire design of your landscape as a whole. And this is where it gets really tricky because you may have different conditions in the side of your property versus the front, like I was saying, with the sun and the shade and the moist and the dry conditions. So it can be really difficult to start thinking about it as a whole. I like to think about my landscape as a canvas that I'm actually painting on, and how would I make this part go with this part, and using the same colors like I was talking about earlier is one great way to get started with that. But really considering what the landscape looks like as a whole picture instead of just as separate pieces is a great way to do this. And I always recommend just going online, using Pinterest, or Houzz is a great website, and just sort of collecting photos of gardens that you really like. And then as you have a big group of photos that you really like, you can start to maybe see some commonalities between those photos. Do you really like them because of the colors that you're using? Do you really like them because they all have roses or hydrangeas in them? And if that's the case, then great, plant some roses, plant some hydrangeas. But my guess is that once you put all of those photos together, you're gonna be more attracted to a vibe of some kind. Like it looks really romantic, or it looks really bold and interesting, or this is really unique in some way, or, you know, I like the bright pops of this, or this style of planter, or things like that. So you might get more of a vibe when you put all of those photos together, which is going to help you to create a landscape that's beautiful and actually unique to who you are and what you like and your specific tastes. And that's what makes gardening so exciting and so fun for me, is actually making it my own instead of just copying what I'm seeing other people are doing. I like to kind of put all of those together and just kind of create my own thing from that. So that's my advice for you with selecting plants for your landscape. If you have any other tips and suggestions, I'd love to hear them in the comments below. And I have lots more videos about different common mistakes I see homeowners making. I'll leave a link to one of those right here, and I'll see you over in that video.